My husband told me he needed 14 days at a silent retreat for a digital detox. I watched him delete his apps and kiss me goodbye. Then, 3 days into his healing, a smart home notification popped up. Nursery temperature set. He was not in California. He was in a Manhattan penthouse with his pregnant assistant, building a new life using my inheritance. My name is Mallory. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, watching the black car carrying my husband, Preston, merge into the relentless flow of Manhattan traffic. He was off to a 14-day silent retreat in Northern California, a complete digital detox. "I am utterly fried, Mal," he had said an hour earlier, his voice convincingly hollow. He'd put on a good show of exhaustion, rubbing his temples and citing the unbearable pressure from Vortex Innovations, his tech corporation. He powered down his phone, his laptop, even his smartwatch, and handed them to me in a small, solemn pile, as if surrendering his vices at the altar of my understanding. No calls, no emails, just silence. I need to heal. I watched him go, and for the first time in months, the knot in my stomach unclenched. I felt a genuine, surprising wave of relief. The past 6 months had been a landscape of quiet hostility. Preston had become distant, irritable. His nights spent at the office, and his weekends lost to a fog of strategic planning. His quick temper and cold shoulder had become the new normal. This retreat, this admission of needing help, felt like the first positive step he'd taken toward us in a long time. Maybe, I thought, he really was just burnt out. I returned to the sterile quiet of our apartment. As a senior art curator, I live in a world of nuance, of studying the hidden story beneath the paint. Our home, however, was Preston's canvas, all cold marble, sharp chrome, and muted grays. It was a space I occupied, not one I lived in. I made tea and settled into his Eames chair, the silence he craved ironically settling over me. I had 2 full weeks of it. The peace lasted for 3 days. On the 3rd afternoon, I was sorting through auction catalogs on the shared family iPad, a device Preston rarely touched but had forgotten to log out of. I was admiring a mid-century sculpture when a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was from an app I barely recognized, Smart Nest. The message read, "Successfully set temperature to 24 degrees C for nursery room at the Skyview." I stared at the white letters. My blood did not run cold. It simply stopped. My mind, trained to catalog and analyze, processed the data. Nursery. We did not have children. We were not trying for children. Preston had always been clear that his legacy was his company, not a family. The Skyview. I had never heard of it. We owned this penthouse and a small cabin upstate. That was all. My finger moved before I had consciously given it a command. I tapped the notification. The SmartNest app opened, revealing a clean interface I had never set up. It showed a floor plan for a property named the Skyview. There was a master bedroom, a kitchen, a great room, and a nursery. A small icon in the corner of the great room tile indicated a live camera feed. My thumb hovered, a millimeter of space separating me from a truth I suddenly, desperately, did not want. The silence of the penthouse was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. I pressed the icon. The screen flickered, then resolved into a crystal-clear image. It was a stunning, sun-drenched apartment, different from ours, with warm woods and plush, modern furniture, and standing in the center of it was Preston. He was not wearing the simple, contemplative clothing he'd packed for a retreat. He was in a crisp linen shirt, holding a bottle of champagne. He looked vibrant, relaxed, and happier than I had seen him in years. He was laughing as he poured a glass for a young woman sitting on the sofa. My breath hitched. I knew her. Jasmine, his former personal assistant, a woman barely in her mid-20s, whom he'd supposedly fired 6 months ago for gross incompetence. She raised her glass, toasting him. And as she shifted toward the light, The camera angle caught her profile, revealing the unmistakable, pronounced curve of a woman deep into her pregnancy. Preston was not healing. He was nesting. I did not scream. I did not throw the iPad against the cold marble wall. The training of a lifetime, the discipline of a curator who can spot a forgery from 10 feet away, took over. I simply sat there, my gaze sharpening, and I began to deconstruct the scene. I watched the live feed for an hour. My husband, the man supposedly meditating in silence, was performing. He was vibrant, attentive, rubbing Jasmine's feet as she sipped champagne. But I wasn't watching them. I was watching the background, the apartment. My eyes scanned the details, inventorying. The sofa they were sitting on was a B&B Italia, the exact model in dove gray velvet I had bookmarked in a catalog 6 months ago. Preston had glanced at the price tag and scoffed, declaring it obnoxiously expensive. The floor lamp in the corner was an Arco, casting a perfect, soft light. The rug beneath their feet was a hand-knotted silk from a designer I had personally recommended to him for our own living room. He had dismissed it as impractical. Everything in that penthouse was something I had desired, something I had pointed out, something he had vetoed. He hadn't just built a new life, he had built it using my taste, furnishing his mistress's nest with the exact items he had denied his wife. The sheer, calculated audacity of it was breathtaking. I closed the app, the screen going black, reflecting my own placid, expressionless face. The shock had bypassed emotion and solidified directly into ice. I picked up my phone. I did not call Preston. I did not call Jasmine. I called Oscar. Oscar is my oldest friend, the only person I trust implicitly, and, conveniently, one of the sharpest corporate lawyers in New York. Mallory. His voice was warm. I thought you were enjoying 2 weeks of spousal silence. Don't tell me you're bored already. I need you to find something for me, I said, my voice perfectly level. A property. It's called the Skyview. It's a new development, I think. I need to know who owns it. The lack of emotion in my voice must have alerted him. Just the owner. Or the story. Everything. Oscar. The price. The source of funds. The shell company it's inevitably hidden under. I need it yesterday. Done, he said. Give me 3 hours. He called back in 2. You're not going to like this, Mal, he began, his professional lawyer voice firmly in place. The Skyview is a high-end condo building. The penthouse unit, specifically, was purchased 3 months ago, paid in full, no mortgage. Who? A shell company. JVP Enterprises LLC, formed 4 months ago. Standard stuff. But the money. The money is the problem. It was a single wire transfer from a trust. I was already walking to my study. Which trust? The Vance Art Fund. The phone almost slipped from my hand. The Vance Art Fund. My fund. The collection of impressionist and modern art my father had spent his life acquiring. Left to me, and me alone. It was my legacy, my passion, and my most significant financial asset. I had, in a moment of marital trust years ago, given Preston managerial access to handle the investments and insurance, to let him participate in my side of our wealth. Mallory, are you there? Oscar asked. I have to go, I whispered, hanging up. I logged into the private portal for the fund. It was supposed to be untouchable, the principle sacred. My agreement with Preston was clear he could invest the dividends, move the interest, but never, ever touch the collection itself. My eyes scanned the statements. For the past 3 months, the interest payments looked normal, but then I clicked on the asset ledger. It was gone. No, not gone. Leveraged. There, in black and white, was a lien, a $2 million loan taken out 3 months ago, collateralized against the entirety of my father's collection. The loan was not from a bank. It was a hard money loan from a private lender I'd never heard of. The signature on the authorization document was electronic. It was my name. But I had never signed it. He had forged my signature. He had taken my father's legacy, the core of my identity, and pawned it to buy a penthouse for his pregnant secretary. He had done this while simultaneously telling me that his own company, Vortex Innovations, was struggling, that we needed to cut back, that my extravagant gallery budgets were a problem. The cold anger I felt was so pure, so potent, it was almost stabilizing. This was not a simple, tawdry affair. This was not a midlife crisis. This was a calculated long-term financial assassination. Preston wasn't just cheating on me. He was actively, methodically, trying to liquidate me. He had been at the retreat for 3 days. He had 11 more days of his fabricated enlightenment. 11 days. That was not a long time to dismantle a life, but I work well under pressure. My initial impulse was to get on the app, turn the nursery temperature down to freezing and the great room up to a boil, and watch them scramble. But that was emotion. This was finance. This was war. I would not give him the satisfaction of knowing I knew. Not yet. I needed him secure in his new penthouse, drinking my champagne, believing I was at home, naive and waiting. My first calls were to protect the assets. The real assets. I called the vice president of the private bank that managed the Vance Art Fund. "Michael," I said, my voice crisp, "I am invoking an immediate emergency freeze on the entire Vance collection. I have credible evidence of a fraudulent, unauthorized loan taken against the principal assets. I am faxing you a sworn affidavit." He sputtered, mentioning Preston, spousal permissions, and joint access. "My husband," I interrupted, "is the subject of the fraud investigation. If a single painting is appraised, moved, or further leveraged without my explicit written consent, I will hold the bank personally liable for gross negligence in facilitating the theft of my father's estate. Do you understand me?" The freeze was in place within an hour. The collection was safe from further damage, but the $2 million hole Preston had created was still there. Bleeding. I called Oscar back. "The art is locked down. Now what?" "Now we neutralize him," Oscar said. "He used your money to secure his new life. We need to use his money to take it away. He is clearly siphoning funds." "Where from?" "Vortex Innovations," I said. "Too big, too corporate, too slow," Oscar countered. "We'd get caught in auditing for months. He must have a personal project, a vanity project, something he loves more than the main company." And I knew. Vortex Studio. It was a small, 3-story commercial building downtown, a sleek glass box he'd bought 3 years ago using money from our joint accounts. It was his skunk works, he'd claimed, his personal R&D lab for the projects too advanced for his shareholders. It was his baby, his legacy. "It's held in joint tenancy," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "And he is, officially, off the grid." Oscar asked. He gave me a notarized letter before he left, a copy for his HR department, stating he was on a 14-day silent retreat and would be completely unreachable, under any circumstances, for the full duration. He said it was to protect him from shareholder demands. I heard Oscar laugh, a sharp, sudden bark. "Oh, Preston, he just handed us the keys. Under state law, if an asset is held jointly and one party is demonstrably and willfully incommunicado, the other party can execute an emergency sale to prevent catastrophic financial loss. And I'd say a $2 million fraudulent loan counts as catastrophic." I didn't need to be told twice. I didn't call a standard broker. I called the most aggressive commercial real estate shark I knew. "I need to sell the Vortex Studio building," I said, "and I need it done in 48 hours. "Mallory, that's impossible." He laughed. "A commercial sale like that, it's a 6-month escrow, minimum. Not if it's priced 20% below market," I said. "All cash. No contingencies. As is." There was a sudden silence on the line. 20%. Are you being threatened?" "I am freeing up capital," I said. "Do you have a buyer Or should I call someone else? I have a tech fund that's been trying to get on that block for a year, he said, his voice all business now. They'll do it. I'll have the offer on your desk by 5 p.m. The offer arrived at 4:30. It was a clean, brutal transaction. I signed the documents, using Oscar's legal filing of Preston's willful absence as my authority. The next morning, the wire transfer cleared, a massive, beautiful sum of money. I did not use it to pay off the loan. Not yet. Instead, I had Oscar move the entire amount, every single penny, into a newly created triple-locked escrow account. It was an account that Preston did not know existed. It was an account that he could not touch, see, or even guess at. I checked the SmartNest app. Preston and Jasmine were watching a movie. They looked comfortable. In less than 2 days, I had frozen my assets and liquidated his. He was still living like a king, completely unaware that his entire kingdom, the legacy he was building, was already gone. He had 9 days left. It was the 7th day. I had just finished a call with Oscar, confirming the proceeds from the Vortex studio sale were safely locked away in the new escrow account. The new owners, I learned, had already begun their demolition. I was savoring the image when my personal phone, the one Preston never called, rang. It was a blocked number. I let it ring 3 times, composed my features into an expression of gentle concern, and answered. Hello. A pause. Then, a voice I barely recognized attempted to fill the line. It was faint, breathy, and artificially serene. Mal. Preston. I let a small gasp escape. Oh my goodness. Are you all right? I thought the phones were forbidden. I was so worried. I had to, he whispered, a masterful performance of a man broken down and rebuilt. I had to break the rules. I'm having a breakthrough. Mal, the silence here, the clarity, it's changing everything, and all I can think about is you. I closed my eyes, picturing him in that penthouse, Jasmine on his lap, reading from a script. Me, how I've taken you for granted, he continued, the false sanctimony dripping from every word. I've been letting Vortex, the pressure, I've let it make me a stranger. I miss you. I just needed to hear your voice to ground me in what's real. It was a probe, a delicate, narcissistic reconnaissance mission. He was checking his perimeter, ensuring his home base was still secure, still stupid, still waiting for him. I gave him the performance he deserved. Oh, Preston, I said, my voice thickening with manufactured emotion. That's the most wonderful thing you could have said. I'm so proud of you for doing this. For us. He let out a long, satisfied sigh. The probe had met no resistance. I promise. Mal, he said, his voice stronger now. When I get back, everything will be different. I'm going to be the man you deserve. I know you will. I cooed. Please, don't worry about me. Take all the time you need. If you feel you need another week to complete your journey, please take it. I can handle everything here. Just get better. Thank you, he breathed, the relief in his voice palpable. I have to go. I love you. I love you too, I said, and ended the call. I placed the phone on the desk. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. A minute passed. Then the phone buzzed. It was not a call. It was a text alert from the supplementary credit card account, the one he'd lost in a cab 2 months ago and I had supposedly canceled, but which he had clearly just reported lost to get a new number issued for himself. The alert read, Transaction approved, $5,250 at Le Petit Air, Luxury Children's Furnishings. He had hung up the phone, fresh from his declaration of love, and immediately completed the purchase for his bastard's nursery. My money, my inheritance, which he'd leveraged, was paying for the penthouse, and my daily income was paying for the cribs. The rage was so cold, it was almost hot. I looked at the alert, this beautiful, perfect piece of evidence. He was in Manhattan, not California. He was buying baby furniture, not finding his soul. My first instinct was to call the bank and set the card on fire. But no. A man cut off from his money becomes cautious. He becomes a rat, hiding in the walls. A man who thinks his credit is limitless, he becomes a pig, sloppy and loud, eating himself to death at the trough. I picked up the phone and dialed the premium concierge for my bank. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Vance Mallory," the cheerful voice said. "Hello, Cynthia," I said, reading her name from a previous statement. "I need your help with my husband's supplementary card. He's traveling for business, and I'm worried he's going to hit his limit and be embarrassed. Could we please raise his monthly limit, let's say? Double it." "Of course, Mrs. Vance Mallory. Happy to. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said, as if the thought had just struck me. "It's a clerical nightmare, but my accountants are auditing my personal expenses this quarter. I need to change the primary notification email for that supplementary card. All detailed, itemized receipts need to go directly to them for tracking." "Not a problem. What's the address?" I gave her 2 email addresses. The first belonged to the Chief Compliance Officer of Vortex Innovations. The second belonged to the entire board of directors. "Please ensure this includes all past and future itemized reports for this billing cycle," I said. "He's been so busy, I'm sure his expenses are a mess." "It's done," she said. I hung up. Preston was meticulous about keeping his worlds separate: his corporate life, his family life, and his secret life. He was the high-flying CEO of Vortex Innovations, currently on a documented HR-approved mental health leave. He had no idea that the company's entire board of directors, the men he answered to, were about to receive an itemized receipt for a $5,000 Italian crib, purchased in Midtown Manhattan, charged to his wife's account on day 7 of his silent retreat. Let him shop, I thought. Let them burn him. I knew the board of directors at Vortex had received the first round of itemized receipts for the nursery by day 9. The silence from that front was deafening, a kettle-building pressure. But the first explosion came from a different, entirely expected direction. Beatrice, Preston's mother. She called on a Tuesday morning. I let it ring, steadying myself, before answering with the same polite, slightly fragile tone I had perfected. "Beatrice, hello." "Mallory," she snapped. Her voice was never warm. It was like chipped ice. "I am just sick with worry. My poor boy, driven to a complete nervous breakdown. He's in isolation because of the stress." I held the phone away from my ear. "He'll be back soon, Beatrice. The retreat is supposed to be very healing." "Healing?" she scoffed. "It's humiliation. That's what it is. A man like Preston, a CEO, forced to go sit in the mud and chant because his wife runs him ragged. You've always been too ambitious, filling his head with your art, your galas. You never just made a home for him." This was her favorite script, the one where I, the successful curator from an old family, was the cold, sterile wife, and he, her precious boy from new money, was the victim of my sophisticated world. He needed comfort. "Mallory," she pressed on, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, cruel tone. "And you weren't providing it. A man has needs." "He's my husband, Beatrice," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "And he needs an heir," she suddenly shouted, the facade of maternal concern cracking to reveal the raw greed beneath. "He needs a legacy, not just paintings. Jasmine is a sweet girl. A loyal girl. If you can't be bothered to give my son a child, you simply have to accept that he found someone who would." There it was. The confirmation. It wasn't just Preston. It was a family conspiracy. They had known. They had known he was building a new family, stealing my inheritance, and they approved. Beatrice didn't just know about Jasmine, she was rooting for her. I realized in that second that they saw me as the obstacle, the bank account that needed to be circumvented, the barren wife who was holding the family name hostage, The ice in my veins, which had been cold, now began to burn. "Beatrice," I said, cutting her off. My voice was no longer fragile. It was flat, hard, and final. "You're right." The sudden agreement stunned her into silence. "You are absolutely right," I continued, walking to the window and looking down at the city. "He does need a legacy, and things have been out of order. I am currently in the process of putting everything back in its proper place." I heard her take a small, sharp breath, quickly recalibrating. She thought I was surrendering. She thought I was agreeing to a quiet divorce where I would fund their new dynasty. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction, "I'm glad to see you're finally being practical, dear. It's for the best. Preston will be so relieved when he's centered." "I'm sure he will be," I said. "Goodbye, Beatrice." I hung up before she could reply. My fingers flew across the screen, sending a message to Oscar. She knew. Beatrice knew everything. About Jasmine, the baby, the apartment. She is an active participant. Add her to the civil suit. Full discovery. I want charges for conspiracy and concealment of assets. I want her bank accounts. Oscar's reply was immediate. "With pleasure." I had one last task for the day. My anger was now a quiet, creative engine. I was done being the victim. It was time to be the curator again. I went into my archives, not the main collection, but the storage room of pieces we used for teaching. I found what I was looking for: a forgery, a rather good one, a copy of a Fragonard painting. The Stolen Kiss. It was technically proficient, but utterly soulless, worthless to a trained eye. It was the kind of thing someone like Jasmine, with new money and no taste, would think was valuable. I had it beautifully framed in ornate, gaudy gold. I did not go to the Skyview myself. I had it messengered, addressed to Jasmine at the Skyview. There was a gift card enclosed. I didn't sign it. The message was simple, just 6 words, written in my clean, curatorial script. Fakes never have any real value. I pictured her opening it. I pictured her reading the note, confused at first, then looking at the painting, then back at the note. I pictured her showing it to Preston, the small seed of doubt planted. Was he the fake? Was the money? The game was no longer just mine. It was time to let the other players know they were on the board. The sale of Vortex Studio closed at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, day 10 of Preston's retreat. The new owners, a famously aggressive real estate fund, were not sentimental. By 10:30, they had their own security team on site. By 11, the locks were changed. By noon, Preston's entire elite skunkworks team, the one he had handpicked, was standing on the sidewalk with their personal items in cardboard boxes. The chaos must have been immediate. Their keycards failed. Their vision was over. They did what any panicked employee would do. They called their boss. They must have blown up his retreat phone, his real phone, his email. It took 3 hours for the panic to breach his fortress. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang. It wasn't the blocked Serene number. It was his main line. He was breaking his own rules. I let it ring 5 times, then answered. "Hello? You?" The word was not a greeting. It was an explosion. It was the sound of a man who had just been shot, a raw, guttural scream of disbelief and rage. "What did you do?" I held the phone away from my ear. "Preston. My goodness, what's wrong? You sound unenlightened. I thought you were in silent meditation." "My studio!" he roared, and I could hear him pacing, his breath hot into the microphone. "My team. They're on the street. They said the building was sold. They said, 'You sold it. How could you sell my studio?'" "Oh, that?" I said, my voice light. I walked over to my desk and idly straightened a stack of catalogs. "Yes, I sold it. You can't. It's in both our names I didn't sign. I will have this reversed. I will have you arrested. Mallory, I swear to God." You really should read the documents you sign. Darling, I said, bored. That notarized letter you gave me, the one for HR, the one declaring you willfully incommunicado for 14 days, it's a very useful legal tool. An emergency came up. What emergency? He spat. A $2 million emergency, I said, my voice turning to ice. The loan you took against my father's art collection, the one you forged my signature to get, that was the emergency. I found myself in a position where I needed to liquidate a joint asset to cover a fraudulent debt you created. I'm just tidying up your messes. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. The gears in his head were grinding, shifting from pure animal rage to cold, reptilian calculation. I could hear the exact moment he realized what I knew. And, more importantly, what he thought I didn't. Mallory, he said, his voice instantly, dangerously, different. It was no longer a scream. It was a low, placating, manipulative purr. Listen to me. Listen. That was a mistake. A business problem. You don't understand the pressure. I was moving money to cover a temporary shortfall at Vortex. I was going to put it all back. He thought this was just about the money. He thought I was a hysterical wife who had found a financial indiscretion and overreacted. He had no idea I had the camera feed. He had no idea I knew about the nursery. He still thought his fortress, the sky view, was safe. You should have waited for me. He pushed, trying to regain control. You've made a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. I can fix this as soon as I get back. Of course you can, Preston, I said, my voice sickeningly sweet. You just focus on your healing. You've got 5 days left. Don't worry about a thing. I hung up before he could reply. He called back immediately. I ignored it. He called again. I silenced my phone. He was now trapped. He was in the sky view, a place he could not admit he was, unable to show his face at his company or at the studio he no longer owned. I let him stew in that panic for exactly 1 hour. Then I picked up my phone, opened my banking app, and found the supplementary card, the one he had used for the nursery furniture, the one Jasmine was, at that very moment, most likely using. I imagined her, triumphant and pregnant, at the front desk of the most expensive private hospital on the Upper East Side, paying for their deluxe birthing package. I didn't cancel the card. I just locked it. The phone rang again 20 minutes later. This time, it was a blocked number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message that followed was not the calm, collected mistress I had seen on camera. It was Jasmine. She was weeping, a raw, gasping, humiliated sound. Preston won't answer, she sobbed. I'm at the hospital. The card, it was declined. They keep saying it's declined. I can't pay. They're looking at me. Preston won't answer his phone. Please, Mallory, I know you're there. Please, you have to fix it. I deleted the message. He was in his cage. She was in hers. And I was in my penthouse, holding all the keys. The lock on the card was a match to a powder keg. Preston was trapped. I had anticipated his moves. Every account we shared had been locked or emptied. The massive payout from his Vortex studio was in my new, firewalled escrow account. He was the CEO of a major tech firm, and he likely didn't have enough liquid cash in his pocket to pay for Jasmine's deluxe hospital package. The humiliation of the declined card, especially in front of the woman he was trying to impress, must have been absolute. A man like Preston, a man built on ego and image, cannot survive being seen as weak. He wouldn't go to his corporate friends. That would be admitting failure. He wouldn't go to his mother. She didn't have that kind of cash. He would go to the sharks. I found the proof 3 days later, a new, massive wire transfer into his personal account, the one I couldn't touch, but Oscar could monitor from a lender known for its 20% interest rates and its brutal collection methods. Preston had just signed away his future to pay for his mistress's present. He was bleeding out, and the scent of blood travels fast. Jasmine, I had correctly surmised, was not a romantic. She was an opportunist. She had attached herself to a rising star, a powerful CEO. But the man she was with now was panicking, borrowing dirty money, and had just lost his personal passion project, the studio. She had watched the provider fail a crucial test. Her calculation was simple: she was pregnant, and she had just bet on the wrong horse. The panicked, weeping voicemails stopped. They were replaced by something far more calculated, a direct message on Instagram. She unblocked me. "Mrs. Vance Mallory, I know you hate me, but you need to listen to me. I am a victim in this just as much as you are." I almost laughed. Her profile picture was still the one from the penthouse, champagne in hand. "Preston lied to me," the message continued. "He told me your marriage was over. Just a piece of paper. He said you were cold and that the divorce was amicable. He said he was managing his own money. I never knew he was taking from you. I swear." It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to paint herself as a naive girl swept up by a powerful man. She was testing the waters, trying to find an ally. I did not respond. I simply watched the screen. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and reappeared. She was debating her next move. Finally, the real offer. I am scared of him. He is not who he says he is. He's dangerous. He told me things. About his company. About your art. This got my attention. "I have recordings," she typed, the words coming in a rush. "He likes to brag. He likes to talk. I have him on audio. Bragging about how he pulled one over on the Vortex board. Bragging about how he unlocked your art fund. She was selling him. She was selling her legacy to the highest bidder, and she was betting that I was it. "I will give you everything," she wrote. "All the files. In exchange. I just want to be left alone. I just want to be safe. I'll sign anything that says he tricked me. Please, Mallory. He's the monster, not me." I didn't believe her. She was a rat fleeing a sinking ship, and she was trying to take a piece of cheese with her. But the evidence was real. I didn't write back with assurances. I didn't offer her safety or forgiveness or money. I simply replied with a new, encrypted, anonymous email address I had created just for this. Nothing else. Less than 5 minutes later, my new inbox pinged. There were 6 files, all audio, all dated within the last 3 months. I put on my best studio headphones and poured a glass of wine. I hit play. It was him. Not the zen voice from the retreat. Not the furious roar from the phone. It was his boardroom voice, slick with arrogance and post-coital confidence. "The board is a bunch of sleeping old men," he was telling her, a faint clink of ice in the background. "I've been running a parallel R&D budget for 6 months. They think it's for innovation. I'm billing them for our life. Baby." I clicked the next file. The art was the best part. Her signature, please. A simple high-res scan and a digital authorization. The bank didn't even blink. $2 million. Just sitting there. She's sentimental. I'm practical. I sat back. The wine untouched. I had it. I had the complete set. The SmartNest camera feed proof of adultery, destroying his character and his legal retreat alibi. The bank records hard proof of the $2 million fraudulent loan against my assets. And now, these audio files, a direct confession, in his own voice, to corporate embezzlement and wire fraud. The game was over. I had all the pieces. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a criminal, and he had 4 more days of his retreat left. The 14th day arrived. This was the day the enlightened, healed man was meant to return. The man who stepped out of the Uber at our building was not him. I watched from the security feed I still had access to. He was haggard, pale, with dark circles under his eyes that no amount of meditation could create. The last few days of financial panic, the high-interest loan, the loss of his studio, the public humiliation of his mistress had visibly weathered him. He was wearing the same clothes he'd left in, but they were rumpled, his entire posture defensive. He was a cornered animal, and he was coming home not to heal, but to attack. I knew his plan as if he had written it down for me. He would storm in, play the victim, accuse me of hysteria, and then, when that failed, he would threaten and intimidate. He would demand I reverse the sale of the studio. He would try to bully me into unlocking the accounts. He was coming to reestablish his dominance. I watched on the camera as he jammed his key into the lobby door. It didn't turn. He tried again, harder, rattling it. The new high-security deadbolt held firm. I had the locks changed on day 12. He backed away from the door, his face a mask of confusion, quickly melting into pure, unadulterated rage. He fumbled for his phone, his thumb jabbing at the screen to call me, to scream at me, to unleash the storm. He never got the chance. My text message arrived on his screen at that exact second. I had timed it perfectly. Meet me at the Vortex Innovations boardroom, 10 a.m. Bring a lawyer, if you can afford one. I watched him read it. He froze, his head bowed over the phone. I could see the shift in his mind. He had been preparing for a domestic fight, a brawl within the walls of our home where he held the physical and psychological advantage. I had moved the battlefield. He looked up, not at my window, but toward the financial district. His entire demeanor changed. He straightened his jacket. He smoothed his hair. This was his territory. My penthouse was just a place he slept, but Vortex Innovations was his kingdom. He was the CEO. He was the power there. He must have thought I was an idiot, a naive, scorned wife making a rookie mistake. To challenge him in his own boardroom in front of his subordinates, he would destroy me. He would paint me as emotionally unstable, a vindictive woman interfering with his business. He would have security remove me. He stormed off, not waiting for another Uber, but flagging a cab with a sharp, aggressive gesture. He was on his way, brimming with a renewed, arrogant confidence. He was going to put the crazy wife back in her box. What he didn't know, as he rehearsed his righteous speech in the back of that cab, was that I wasn't coming alone, and he wasn't walking into a room of his employees. He was walking into a room of his judges. 2 hours ago, I had forwarded my entire file to the chairman of the board at Vortex Innovations. The itemized receipts for the nursery, all of them, sent directly from the credit card company, flagged as shareholder risk. The security footage from the Skyview, showing him in Manhattan on day 3 of his medical leave. And, most beautifully, the complete, unedited audio files from Jasmine. The files where he, in his own arrogant voice, detailed exactly how he was embezzling corporate funds to pay for his new life. He thought he was the lion, walking into his den. He had no idea I had already filed his teeth and locked the cage. The boardroom at Vortex Innovations was on the 50th floor, a glass-walled cage overlooking the city. When Preston burst through the double doors, he was a storm of righteous indignation. "Mallory, this is insane," he started. "You cannot just—" He stopped. The room was not full of his subordinates. It was almost empty. I was sitting at the far end of the massive mahogany table. To my left sat Oscar, his briefcase open, files stacked neatly before him. To my right sat Marcus Thorne, the CEO and chairman of Vortex Innovations, a man who looked like he had been carved from granite, and standing by the window, in dark, unassuming suits, were 2 men and a woman I did not know, but whose aura of quiet, patient authority was unmistakable. Economic crimes. Preston's bluster evaporated. He physically recoiled, his eyes darting between me, Marcus, and the officers. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice a full octave higher. "Marcus, what is she doing here? This is a private matter." It ceased to be a private matter. "Preston," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. When you started billing your private matters to my company. What? That's insane! Preston turned on me, his face contorting into a mask of theatrical concern. She's not well. She's been under a lot of stress. She's paranoid, delusional. She's been making up these fantasies. He was trying to paint me as the hysterical wife, the classic tired defense. Fantasies. I asked, my voice cutting through his performance. I picked up a small remote from the table. You mean like this one? I aimed the remote at the 80-inch screen that dominated the far wall. It flickered to life. It was not a spreadsheet. It was the great room at the Skyview. The video was time-stamped day 4. Preston was on the couch. Jasmine was beside him, her head in his lap. The sound was crystal clear. Just a little longer. Preston's voice filled the silent boardroom. We just have to let her spin out. She's fragile. Jasmine's voice, saccharine and greedy. And then, when she finally dies, or you get her committed. All of this, the penthouse, the art, it's all ours. Right. Preston's image on the screen leaned in and kissed her. When that bitch Mallory is finally gone, he said, everything she has becomes ours. The art, the company, everything. Our son will have an empire. Preston staggered back, as if he'd been physically struck. That's deep fake. That's not real. She faked that. The IP address of the feed, Oscar said, without looking up, is registered to the building's central server. The purchase of the camera system is on your credit card, the one you just told your board you were not using, as you were in California. Marcus Thorne had heard enough. He took a thick, bound file and did not slide it, but threw it across the table. It skidded to a stop in front of Preston. Le Petit Air. $5,200, billed as client systems research. A $7,000 charge at a private hospital, billed as executive retreat fees. A $2,000 diamond bracelet, billed as shareholder gifts. You are a common thief, Preston. You are terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and felony embezzlement. The blood drained from Preston's face. His entire world, his power, his image, his future had been vaporized in under 60 seconds. The CEO title, the only thing he'd ever truly loved, was gone. He turned, his eyes wild. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at the police. He looked at me. His face crumpled. The arrogance, the anger, all of it dissolved into a grotesque mask of desperation. He lunged toward the table, his hands outstretched. Mallory. Mal, please. He wept. Actually wept. You don't understand. I did it for us. For a family. I just wanted a child. Something we could never. It was all a mistake. Don't do this to me. Think of our life. Think of what we had. He was trying to appeal to the wife he had just plotted to replace. He was pulling the last, most pathetic lever he had. I stood up, smoothing the front of my dress. I looked down at him, this hollow, weeping shell of a man. You wanted a child. I asked, my voice calm. Congratulations, Preston. Your child will have a father in prison. The officers, who had been waiting patiently by the window, stepped forward. Preston Vance, the lead detective said, her voice devoid of any emotion. You are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and felony embezzlement. As they pulled his arms behind his back, the sharp click of the handcuffs echoed in the silent, glass-walled room. The reality of it finally hit him. This was not a negotiation. It was an execution. No! He screamed, his voice cracking. He lunged, not at the officers, but toward me. A desperate, final plea. Mallory, you can't. She'll wait for me, Jasmine. Jasmine will wait. He was still clinging to the fantasy, the adoring girl, the new family, the legacy. He believed that, at the very least. He had won that. I stepped closer, close enough that the officers tensed. I leaned in, my lips almost brushing his ear, my voice a soft, private whisper that was just for him. "She won't," I said. He froze, his wild eyes meeting mine. "Jasmine sold you out." "Preston," I murmured. "She sold me those audio files and your corporate secrets for $50,000. She's already gone. She took the money and disappeared 3 days ago." I watched his face begin to collapse, but I wasn't finished. "And the baby," I added, delivering the final, fatal blow. That last, frantic hospital visit. It wasn't just a billing issue. It was a DNA test. I got the results this morning. It's not your child. Preston. It might have been a lie. It might have been the truth. It didn't matter. What mattered was the flicker of hope in his eyes, the last ember of his future, completely extinguishing. The sound that came out of him was not a word, but a hollow wail. He visibly deflated, his entire body going limp as the officers pulled him away, dragging him in his shame past the stunned faces of his former colleagues who had gathered in the hallway. The fallout was immediate and beautiful. The loan sharks, unable to collect from a man in a federal holding cell, went after his only other asset. They foreclosed on the loan he had taken out on his mother's nursing home. Beatrice called me, weeping, screaming, begging. I listened for a moment to the sound of her world ending, and then I blocked her number. With the clean money from the sale of the Vortex studio, I paid off the fraudulent $2 million loan in full, reclaiming my father's collection before the first payment was even due. The bank, terrified of a lawsuit, sent me a groveling apology. 6 months later, I stood in the main gallery, my gallery, for my first exhibition since the ordeal. The room was packed. I had completely redecorated the penthouse, replacing his cold chrome with my warm, rich textures. I had sold his company stock and donated the pittance that was left. I called the new show The Truth. It featured a series of masterpieces that had been damaged, forged, or hidden, now meticulously restored to their original glory. My return to the art world was not just a comeback, it was a coronation. I stood by the window of my penthouse, a glass of wine in my hand, looking down at the city lights. He had tried to take my legacy, my home, and my identity. He had failed. I wasn't just free, I was powerful. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments so we can connect, and please share your thoughts on Preston's downfall. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, give this video a like, and show your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.